What's up, folks? This is Addy Ads. This is the Epstein Files, Ghislaine Maxwell trial coverage, public intelligence update. A lot going on since the trial has ended. I am finally out of New York, and I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It was obviously it was very nice being close to uh, the courthouse when I was, and even when I was further away. Uh, having that access is really nice. But same time, it feels good to be out in New York. That being said, recent update on Ghislaine Maxwell trial. She won't face a separate perjury trial. Her charges for perjury will be dropped if she loses her post-trial motion for a new trial entirely due to Scotty David speaking out and causing a possible mistrial. The feds say avoiding a separate trial in the false statement counts advances victims' significant interest in bringing closure to this matter and avoid trauma of more testimony. The government believes that the court should order preparation of the presentence investigation report and schedule a sentencing proceeding approximately 3 to 4 months from today's date. This was last night, I believe. That schedule permits sufficient time for the preparation of the PSI and resolution of post-trial motions. In the event the defendant's post-trial motions are denied, the government is prepared to dismiss the severed perjury counts at the time of the sentencing in light of the victim's significant interest in bringing closure to this matter and avoiding the trauma of testifying again. So I would say, I don't know. I'm not a victim, obviously, but my contention would be that I would want her to go through with the perjury charge trial as well. I believe it was 2 counts. And that being said, I want to talk about the victim's experience. I learned this today. I didn't know this. Apparently, some member of the courthouse, probably security, said to one of the victims, quote, "In my eyes, you're not a victim," which I found abhorrent, to be frank, disrespectful, uncouth, unprofessional. And this was news to me as well, because I do like to read everybody's stuff, listen to everybody's stuff, but apparently the mainstream media was equally, almost, I would say, equally displeased with how they were treated with regards to getting media access to the trial. And that is with the exception of the very few in-house court reporters like Adam Klasfeld or Matthew Russell Lee. We love their work, but talking about the rest of us, even the mainstreamers, independent media like citizens wanting to go and attend the trial, it was difficult. So that was, I think, a surprise to me, at least to a slight degree. Julie Brown said that I guess it was the CSOs and marshals were almost enjoying giving the media a hard time. She described the relationship between the lawyers, amongst the lawyers and the judge as being too incestuous, very chummy. Saying the lawyers are very chummy with each other and the judge too incestuous. So she thought it was, and that's something I mentioned before too. It was like a Studio 54 vibe. That's what I said a couple weeks ago, I think. I can't remember exactly when I said it, but this sort of exclusive group. And Lucia Crowley said that the security was described as aggressive and threatening. We are treated as if we should feel lucky to be given access to this realm. And another thing I wanted to mention that Julie Brown mentioned was, she said, why was there not a spot for victims, to the court administrator, who immediately got aggressive and called security on her, almost throwing her out. So it wasn't, again, just the independent media who was met with this sort of a belligerence from the court security and court administration. So this is more corroboration of the secrecy of the government, the Southern District of New York, with regards to pretty much all proceedings in and of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Federal prosecutors want to schedule her sentencing roughly 3 to 4 months from now, waiting on Judge Allison Nathan to rule on whether there will be a new trial before setting a sentencing date, which is exactly what I discussed with Sean Atwood yesterday. I was on his true crime podcast solo for the first time. So that was awesome, to say the least. He's posting a replay on Odyssey within the fortnight. Just going to post up comments here. Thanks for checking in, people. I will probably get to those later. I don't know if people like me reading comments or not. I would actually like to hear feedback on that. So it's kind of the opposite of Double or Nothing, because either way, it's a benefit to Maxwell, because she got at the least her perjury charges severed, if not an entirely new trial. So at first it's like, oh, that's Double or Nothing. Well, actually, no, it's kind of like the opposite of that. Although we can obviously expect that she won't be satisfied with just the charges getting dropped for perjury. She wants an entirely new trial. So that's the only thing that would satisfy, I think, her in this situation. So again, really surprising that the mainstream media was so, those people I mentioned, dissatisfied with the proceedings in the court and the access that was given to the media. But I did want to cover a couple things, not just with regards to that, but as well, Miss Sarah Kellen, which we're going to get to, and one Lord Peter Mandelson as well, who is someone that Sean and I also discussed. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to tweet it out, Telegram it out when it's ready to be shared. And until then, I'm going to be covering everything else on my own. So that being said, I have no interviews today, but I did interview somebody last night, and the rest of the week I have interviews, or I'm being interviewed. So I'm trying to limit myself to one interview per day, if possible. And so that perjury count news was a little late getting out into the mainstream today, but it looks like it happened just about an hour ago or so. Give me pardon me here, folks. Give me some slack here, because I lost my bookmarks. I don't know where they went. So that being said, let's get into this. This is from Amanda Dershowitz, I think is how you pronounce it. That's actually another journalist I met. She actually covers other reporters and journalists and writers, as opposed to covering beats and kind of combining the stories. So I really enjoyed talking to her. So I wanted to cover this, and I will get to comments, I swear. Okay, but I would like to know what people think about sharing comments, at least verbalizing them. Okay, I want to go to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. At 3:55 a.m. in downtown Manhattan, on the 10th day of the United States of America versus Ghislaine Maxwell trial, a man lay diagonally on a folding chair, zipped into a hooded sleeping bag. He was a paid line sitter, physical insurance that his client would get in first. The man's companion paced back and forth on the flagstones outside the federal courthouse. He was moving to stay warm, but he too was on lookout. "This is a job. This means a client for us," he said. A few days earlier, I had made the mistake of arriving at 6:30 a.m. Even the Starbucks at the northwest corner of Foley Square is open by then. There was no chance of a seat in room 318, the courtroom, where a combination of social distancing and intense public interest mean that very few members of the press were allowed inside. The rest of us gave up our phones and laptops in exchange for stamped brass tokens and elbowed our way to the overflow rooms. These turned out to be empty courtrooms where we could watch the proceedings on small, low-resolution monitors, straining to make out the muffled audio. The diminutive screens and low-quality sound meant that the competition, already sore from missing a seat in 318, was tough. My first day, I slid over to the end of my front row bench so 2 tabloid reporters could sit closer to the monitor. 2 to a row, ladies, said one of the guards. The reporter closest to me looked over her shoulder. Hey, buzz off, she snarled in a New York accent. On day 10 of the trial, I waited with the 2 placeholders, who by 5 a.m. had lowered their guard enough to say that the 7-Eleven over on Broadway was open for a coffee. 2 women and 2 men climbed out of a cab. They were not press. We were going to Napa for my birthday weekend, one of the women said. But then I told my husband, you know what I really want? I want to go to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. I just love digging below the surface. I just love figuring out what really happened, her friend said. We have a 5-year-old, but my husband always says, it's not too late. If you want to join the CIA, we can make it work. A Broadway actor who was writing a television show got online. I was at the El Chapo trial before this, she told me. Broadcast vans arrived to set up their cameras across Center Street. By 6 a.m., Addie adds, an independent reporter wandered up and down the line to chat. That's not true. I got there at like 4:45 at the latest, but that's okay. I'm one of the most censored people on the internet, he told me. His website says YouTube has shut down 8 of his channels, but over the first 2 weeks of the trial, he's already gained 10,000 new Twitter followers. It's actually, that's true. That's accurate. It was the first 2 weeks. Next year, I'm going to cover the drug cartels in Mexico, maybe interview an assassin, he told me. As sunrise approached, the line was buzzing. It was insane. The reporters and court tourists agreed. So disappointing how short the prosecution had cut their case. They were expected to rest by end of the day, when in the beginning, their case was anticipated to last 4 weeks. What's being suppressed? What are they hiding, the line asked. By now, night guards from the courthouse were outside to chat about the case on their way home. Adam Rice, a producer for NBC and MSNBC, and Vicky Ward, a British journalist who profiled Jeffrey Epstein for Vanity Fair in 2003, sprang out of a car service and stepped up to the head of the line. The placeholders nodded hello. Hey, Vicky, these people have been here a long time, said Ads. What are you doing at the front of the line? I've had someone here waiting on my behalf, thank you. That was the wrong accent I just used there. Continuing. Soon the thread of discussion resumed. Ward whispered, where are all the men? We all leaned in to hear. Men are strangely absent from this case. This trial is all about women, and the men, they're the reason this happened, and they've been allowed to just fade away. Inside room 318, reporters sat toward the back with members of the public behind them. 3 sketch artists, already at work, sat behind with their tubs of pastels, brushes, and jam jars of water arranged on the benches beside them. First at the pre-trial hearing, and then again at jury selection, Maxwell had confronted the artists, silently sketching them as they drew her. She turned around, really all the way to sketch us, said Elizabeth Williams, one of the artists. There was something shocking about Maxwell's humanness. As with others accused of terrible crimes, by making Maxwell ubiquitous, the media had turned her into a metaphor, shorthand for a parent's worst nightmare, akin to an abandoned tricycle, an empty shopping cart seat, a piece of candy from a stranger. She was thin enough to be angular. Masked in black, Maxwell was almost invisible as she leaned against the brown marble wall in her beige sweater. When she sat up, she perched on her elbows. The dark swish of her bob, a mesmerizing vestige of her old life, a reminder that Oxford and Belgravia and speaking 5 language doesn't wash off, not even at the Metropolitan Detention Center. That morning, the prosecution called Annie Farmer to the stand. Ward had known Farmer, the first of Maxwell's accusers, to testify under her legal name since her work on the Vanity Fair piece. She and her sister Maria had spoken on the record for the first time with Ward, but the magazine cut Farmer's story. The sisters felt betrayed. Since then, they had spoken out about how tired they were of Ward profiting from their story. With Warren sworn in and seated, the prosecution dived in. Can you please look around the courtroom? Do you see anyone who is giving you a massage? Yes, I do. The prosecution asked Farmer to confirm the accuracy of Government Exhibit 101. And I will cover the rest of that later because this is just a running scroll of all of Amanda's stories. I think it's Dershowitz. I could be wrong in the pronunciation. But yeah, interesting stuff there for sure that she included that. Yeah, so just ending there. Speaking 5 language doesn't wash off, not even at the NBC. So I wanted to share that one, and then a couple other things. I've already covered the Miami Herald story on Elizabeth Stein or Liz Stein, who was also mentioned, I think, by Lucia and Julie Brown on that podcast, which I can actually share if people are interested in. And I like to cover all the bases, get people's different takes. So this is from Adam Classfield. He says, there's been some public confusion on this basic point, so I wanted to share this text from former prosecutor Maggie Krell on what is and isn't at issue in the Ghislaine Maxwell juror matter. Maybe this is obvious, but I think it's important for people to understand that victims of sexual abuse can serve on juries, and certainly every juror brings their own unique personal background and experiences. The questions here are whether the juror lied and failed to disclose material info, and separately, whether there was misconduct during deliberations. And if yes, whether it prejudiced right to a fair trial and an impartial jury. So I wanted to cover that one as well. And additionally, Dershowitz asking Trump for a Maxwell pardon. Quote, I'm not commenting on any contact I may have had with anybody. When Alan Dershowitz was on Jeffrey Epstein's legal team back in 2008, he managed to negotiate an exculpatory non-prosecution deal for the late billionaire pedophile. But Dershowitz's advocacy for his deceased client and his living associates hasn't waned in enthusiasm since Epstein's suspicious 2019 death ruled as a suicide in a Manhattan federal prison. As recently as 2021, in the Sunday Times, Dershowitz was lobbying former President Donald Trump for a preemptive pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime partner in both romance and crime. Maxwell was convicted just before year's end. Lawyers accused at least one juror of having lied on his juror selection questionnaire. Trump became interested in what Maxwell might say to prosecutors after Dershowitz discussed Maxwell's case with him while she was in prison awaiting trial. So, according to the book Landslide, The Final Days of the Trump Presidency, Michael Wolff, his 2021 book about the last days of Trump's administration, also floated an anecdote about Trump's preoccupation with Maxwell. Quote, has she said anything about me? The book reported him wondering. Is she going to talk? Will she roll on anybody? It's tough to say whether that guy is telling the truth. It just really is. That's my take on that. I don't know. I can't say either way. Ian Maxwell. There was one phone call between Professor Dershowitz and a family member during which the generic issue of pardons was touched on. Maxwell added that Dershowitz was not explicitly asked nor volunteered to raise the matter with Trump, and that any resulting contact with him was purely incidental. The Sunday Times asked a source if it would be correct to say that Dershowitz raised the Maxwell case with Trump. The source said it would not be unreasonable to report that. And this is actually from Marlon Ettinger. He spoke with Dershowitz on the phone yesterday, wouldn't confirm or comment on which of the Maxwell brothers he talked with. I'm not commenting on any contact I've had with anybody regarding any pardons, period. I can just tell you the story as it appears is not accurate. So Also mentioned in their conversation was the Giuffre versus Dershowitz libel case. Giuffre filed that case against Dershowitz in April 2019 after he claimed she had conspired with her attorneys to accuse Dershowitz publicly and in his account falsely as part of a plot to extort Les Wexner. Giuffre accused Wexner privately of having sexually abused her back in 2014. A letter filed by Dershowitz's attorney, Christian Keeley, on January 4th revealed Dershowitz had deposed Wexner for a period longer than an hour, one of 5 depositions he'd already taken. Asked if he himself deposed Wexner, he didn't say anything, but I can't tell you. All of it's sealed, so I can't comment on it. Dershowitz's letter also announced his desire to depose Caroline, witness Caroline, who again was revealed recently as Caroline Andreano. Caroline's testimony contradicts plaintiff's allegations that she was a victim of rather than a co-conspirator in Epstein's sex trafficking operation, and speaks to her reputation as an advocate for sex trafficking victims, which she claims Professor Dershowitz has wrongfully injured. Alleged the letter, asking if he thought Carolyn would be willing to cooperate with him. Dershowitz, sounding tired, said, "I don't know. I've had no contact with her." So great stuff there by Marlon Ettinger. He's at footnotesnews.substack.com. His Twitter is Marlon Ettinger. And I'm just going to retweet that so people can see it. Moving along here, folks. Obviously, CNN finally catching up. Prosecutors agree to dismiss perjury counts. Ghislaine Maxwell faces if her perjury charges stick. I'm sorry, her trafficking charges. But I wanted to cover Lord Peter Mandelson Mandelson. I think it's Mandelson as well. And not only that, but Miss Sarah Kellen, who has been, I know what's going on here. Sarah Kellen, who was mentioned recently in Yahoo News with regards to possible interest in being the next target for Epstein prosecutors. This is actually from Katie Bricollet, who writes for the Daily Beast. At Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal trial, a former girlfriend of Epstein was convicted on 5 counts. Victim named Caroline testified that a second woman also arranged for her to be molested by the perverted multimillionaire. I'm jumping in here right away. Not just that, but the fact that she took pictures of Caroline while she was undressed and underage. And that, Kellen not only facilitated that meeting appointment, but also was the one who conducted the photography. Under oath, she testified that did Caroline Andreano. Again, Kellen scheduled some of her massage appointments at his Palm Beach lair, sent for cars to pick Caroline up, and once took nude photographs of her for the pedophile. Then I would get paid $500 to $600 if she could take pictures of me. Kellen knew what was going on, Caroline added. She was older than me, so she was an adult. She knew what was happening. Indeed, Kellen was part of Epstein's inner circle for more than a decade and named, again, on the NPA, which I've covered before. Brad Edwards said, I think that's probably phrased more accurately as why she wasn't charged yet. The way I see it, Sarah has been given dozens, if not hundreds, of chances to potentially reposition herself in this narrative. You're either on the side of the victims or the other side, which is the side of the bad guys. Kellen and her representatives declined to comment for this story. Throughout Maxwell's trial in Manhattan's federal court, Kellen was mentioned dozens of times as a key employee in Epstein's world. As I mentioned, being a sort of assistant, secretary of sorts, phone calls, logistics, etc. And in closing arguments, the defense tried to shift the blame on Kellen. Quote, now the government wants you to believe that because Ghislaine Maxwell traveled to Palm Beach and helped to manage Epstein's properties, she was the one orchestrating massages, despite the fact that you've seen no proof of that. No message pads, no phone records, nothing. Laura Menninger said in her closing statement. You've seen Sarah Kellen was there, who, again, wasn't called to testify, nor was she granted immunity, which I think are inclusive in this context. The defense identified Kellen as one of several witnesses that, here we go, unable to call because they would have invoked their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and protect against self-incrimination. Sarah Kellen, where are you, young lady? I actually don't know how old she is exactly, so I'm going to find that out. She's kind of on my radar, though, folks, I got to say. But Brad Edwards views Kellen on his radar as well, and also as someone positioned one rung under Maxwell, saying, quote, there came a point in time when Ghislaine got smarter and started putting buffers up, and one of the buffers she put in place was Sarah. Sarah is the easiest person to get, whether she testifies or not, and yet she's holding out hope that somebody will forget about her. To me, the best way for her to be forgotten is to be remembered as the person who grew a conscience at some point in time and turned around and helped. Edwards said that while Kellen has never aided victims' civil lawsuits, he plans to file new ones, and she will soon have an opportunity to figure out where she wants to be aligned, either with the victims or against them. While she wants to stake out some middle ground, there isn't just one. In 2013, she married Brian Vickers, 38-year-old NASCAR driver. Their Instagram page shows them going to Italy, Greece, Austria, and Japan. They have homes in Miami Beach and Manhattan. Kellen said, quote, in December 2020, I've been made out to be such a monster, but it's not true. I'm a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. I was raped and abused weekly, she said. Multiple survivors of Epstein's network have filed lawsuits in recent years naming Kellen as an assistant who would summon them to Epstein's bedroom. Epstein's assistant, who in turn would record their telephone numbers and name, said one affidavit. And Caroline testified once again that when she turned 18, she became too old for him. And Teresa Helm, despite that, was 22 when Epstein assaulted her in 2002, which is, it brings it up again. And you have this lady, Morike Chartuni, who I've actually never heard of before, a former model who says Epstein assaulted her when she was 20 in 2000, and that his and Maxwell's lieutenants carry their share of responsibility in perpetrating these countless sex trafficking crimes. So multiple accounts, and that's a new one right there, of people saying that they were trafficked to Epstein or abused by him, even when they were in their mid or early 20s, which I found interesting, with Nadia Bjorlin saying they stopped having a relationship when she was 24, so almost mid-20s there, but more so early 20s. And Chartuni, this former model, said, is it the same as Maxwell, Epstein, or were they themselves in such a controlling environment that they became blind to the morals that they had set aside? The only way to answer these questions is to daylight the facts and let these people be tried. Sarah Kellen and all her co-conspirators must be brought to trial for her sake and the sake of her victims. Without that, it is inevitable that this type of abuse will continue. Kellen isn't the only alleged co-conspirator accused of enabling Epstein. Victims have filed lawsuits naming Leslie Groff, 55-year-old former executive assistant to the financier, as another facilitator, secretary, assistant of sorts. Attorneys Michael Bachner and John Whitcomb said after a more than 2-year investigation by the Department of Justice into Jeffrey Epstein's conduct, which included lengthy interviews of witnesses and a thorough review of relevant communications, we have been informed that no criminal charges will be brought against Leslie Groff. As part of Epstein's professional office staff, they concluded Leslie never witnessed anything improper or illegal. Right. And that is where that one ends there from Miss Bricolet of the Daily Beast, who had that pretty ridiculous title, which is escaping me right now. It's not important enough for me to go and seek out, but I did tweet about it. I'm not sure if I covered it in a broadcast yet, but that being said, wanted to talk about this State Department connection to one of Epstein's properties. But before I get to that, I want to go over comments and then actually talk about Peter Mandelson as well, and just make sure I touched all the bases with Dirty Dershowitz, Alan Dershowitz, lawyer, Harvard law professor for I think twice as long as I've been alive. But this is actually from Lee Brown, just once again reporting about Dershowitz reportedly lobbying Trump to pardon Maxwell before the trial. Ian Maxwell confirmed to the UK paper he discussed the possibility of clemency with Dershowitz. He got Epstein his controversial wrist slap '08 deal, the sweetheart deal. Quote, there was one phone call between Professor Dershowitz and a family member during which the generic issue of pardons were touched on. So I already covered that. I just wanted to make sure people saw that there. But I want to look at comments here too, just so I'm not missing anything. Okay, I'm just reading the comments here, folks. I don't agree with them unnecessarily. Deb says, I don't see them as victims either. At least Virginia Roberts said nothing in her testimony that sounded like she was a victim. 10-year-olds in court are allowed to make choices that result in their rearing. Tamara says, I will definitely watch you and Sean Atwood for sure. Again, that should be released later this week. The new trial to include discovery would be worth the taxpayers' money. I agree. I definitely would be willing to do a new trial if they're not redacting everything and being so secretive and calling witnesses to trial that are more probative in their experiences, testimonies, and therefore evidence, like Virginia Roberts and Maria Farmer. Faces, have a blessed day. Deb says Glenn's trial was all smoke and mirrors. She and those women are all guilty and deserve to face judgment. Those young women knew they were doing something illegal for profit. If those girls like Roberts recruited so many others, where are they? Did they get what they wanted and have no complaints? Asks Deb. Pastels is just Rose trying to share with me the phonetics of the word pastels. Deb says a fair trial for the entire, I think that says complicitness is in ops they facilitated. All the foreign government topples to steal precious metals, oil, and gas with weapons, drugs, chemicals, viruses, vaccination drops through DynCorp. Audra Toop has a lot to say about Kellen on Twitter. Okay, I don't know who that is, but maybe I'll check it out. I should be able to find that one. Ghislaine trained those young women to be spies, procuring positions as lab assistants with scholarships, military file clerks with security clearances. None of those young women were forced. It definitely begs the question, where are these people? And that's something that is a very touchy subject to broach, especially, excuse me, even if you are talking about adults, which I'm not saying the women who have come forward so far would fall into that sort of category, but you'd have to think that statistically speaking, in terms of probability, there were some people in that demographic. Moving on, I may touch on that later, later time. Perhaps if I was, I don't know, Let's continue, though. This is also from Lee Brown. UK politician Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, allegedly called Jeffrey Epstein in jail for a favor. One of Britain's most powerful politicians wasn't afraid to phone him, even while the pedophile was behind bars for sex crimes. A new Dispatches documentary set to air on Britain's Channel 4 Monday claims Lord Peter Mandelson was Labour Business Secretary in 2009 when he called Epstein, then cooling his heels in a Florida jail after pleading to procuring an underage prostitute, trying to arrange a meeting with the boss of JP Morgan Bank. The pedo and the politician were seemingly so close that Epstein even had a pet name for the UK cabinet member, calling him Petey. I must say I was astonished that a British cabinet minister at the time, probably the most powerful man other than the prime minister, was calling Jeffrey in jail. A friend of Epstein's who revealed the call told the documentary. The politician, who had also been Tony Blair's spin doctor, is one of the most powerful figures mentioned in the upcoming TV special called The Prince and the Pedophile, which focuses on Epstein's close ties with Prince Andrew. While I was there, Epstein, received a call and said, "Hello, Petey." And Petey wanted to meet Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan. He said, "Yes, I'll sort it out." Petey turned out to be Secretary of the Board of Trade, Peter Mandelson, he insisted, according to The Sun. Lord Mandelson, 65 years old, has previously been photographed shopping with Epstein. Quote, "Our client has no recollection of a telephone conversation with Mr. Epstein in January 2009. Lawyers for Mandelson, who now sits in the UK's House of Lords upper parliament, told The Sun. He talked to bank CEOs on a regular basis, including Mr. Dimon. These contracts were arranged through his office," said the source. Wow. This it just doesn't stop. It's a ball of wax. It's a ball of yarn. It's the loose thread that's unwrapping it all, as someone once said. Again, I touched on this briefly with Sean in my chat with him, so people can look for that. My first solo appearance with Sean Atwood, which was quite the honor. So I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting to be featured in that piece there with by Amanda Derich, but that was pretty cool. Prince Andrew ordered Petey, said Deb. Mandelson is an ancient family, says Rose. And I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything. Oh, yeah. Where are you at, Judge Kaplan, Lewis Kaplan? I wanted to share this post from Francis Richard Connolly, author and director of Everything is a Rich Man's Trick. And again, this is me trying to cover the bases, get many different takes on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, Epstein saga. He says, "Would someone please buy Judge Lewis Kaplan an English dictionary and get him to look up the word soon? It is defined as, quote, in a short time, like in a few minutes. This is a week later, and the world is still waiting to hear his decision on whether the Prince Andrew civil case for sex assault will proceed to trial. Every passing hour makes it look all the more suspicious that he's still vacillating. Have you been receiving threatening phone calls from MI5, Judge Kaplan? Or Buckingham Palace, perhaps? Or are they about to do to you what they did to Jeffrey Berman? Let's hope you keep your job, eh?" Francis Richard Connolly. That is hilarious. And I think a sentiment expressed that is shared by not just Mr. Connolly, but many of us. Where are you at, Judge Kaplan? We thought this decision would have been here by now, but Judge Kaplan is saying, just as the jury did, patience is a virtue. I wanted to go over this story by Rosie Gray about a State Department house and how the State Department once rented a townhouse seized from Iran to Jeffrey Epstein and sued him for subletting it. Epstein's Upper East Side mansion has become notorious for its reportedly macabre interior decor, immense size and monetary value, and is the site of some of his lurid alleged crimes. But Epstein, the financier who has been charged with sex trafficking and accused of sexually abusing young girls, used to live in a different Upper East Side mansion only a few blocks away. It's a mansion that embroiled him in a dispute involving a lawyer for French Connection heroin ring suspects, the State Department, and transitively the government of Iran. The now forgotten case, laid out in newspaper clips from the time and extensive court documents, offers a glimpse into a strange facet of Epstein's life at the time and constitutes an early example of Epstein popping up in the media as a rich and connected but mysterious New York figure. Beginning in February 1992, Epstein rented a former Iranian government building that had been taken over by the State Department during the Iranian Revolution at 34 East 69th Street in one of Manhattan's most expensive neighborhoods, and at a rate of $15,000 a month. But things went sour when the government sued Epstein in the Southern District of New York, alleging that he had at one point failed to pay the rent on time and had violated the lease by moving out in early 1996 and subletting the place without the State Department's permission. His subtenant was Ivan Fisher, a New York City criminal defense lawyer who had famously defended members of the French Connection and Pizza Connection drug rings. The government also sued Fisher. A lawyer for Epstein did not respond to a request for comment, and attempts to reach Fisher were unsuccessful. A New York Daily News article from the time, headlined, "Lawyer Pays Not a Cent for Palatial East Side Digs," said Fisher had stopped paying rent after learning that the State Department had terminated Epstein's lease as a result of the conflict over Fisher's subtenancy, and was thus living in the home for free. "I'm the perfect tenant," Fisher told the Daily News. The paper described the home's opulence, with carved oak doors, a white marble foyer, 3 kitchens, 3 bedrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookcases, a steam room, 19th century chandeliers, brass sconces, and a white marble central staircase. "I pray to God I can stay," Fisher told the Daily News. Epstein is described in the story as a Palm Beach, Florida financial advisor. The incident, also briefly mentioned in Ward's 2003 Vanity Fair profile of Epstein. The government's complaint rested on its assertion that Epstein had not received permission before installing Fisher as a subtenant, and its grievance with Epstein was only intensified by his charging Fisher $20,000 a month for the rent when the state was charging $15,000, netting Epstein a monthly profit. The voluminous court documents in the case included a later amended complaint by the government, which added more defendants to the suit, a clutch of other lawyers whom the government alleged were in turn subletting office space from Fisher. In a sworn statement, one of those lawyers, Lawrence Gerzog, told the court that he had given Fisher free legal services in exchange for office space, among several other lawyers. The government eventually moved to evict Fisher, and the court ordered Fisher and Epstein, who in the course of the process were eventually involved in litigation against each other, to pay back the rent and vacate the premises. An eviction order was served on July 16, 1998, and the marshal noted on the service receipt that the tenants had moved out. Wow. Getting there wasn't an easy process for the State Department. And I'm going to bring up the picture here because it looks pretty cool. Just in case people want to follow that. It's of the newspaper article there. Let me see if I can zoom a bit so you can see the whole thing. There we go. Continuing on. Getting there wasn't an easy process for the State Department, which began by exchanging strongly worded letters with Epstein's lawyer, Jeffrey Shantz, who was mentioned in the trial. These were included in the court filings. As you are aware, Mr. Epstein's apparent departure from the house and his failure to make timely rental payments in February and March of this year have been matters of serious concern to this office, wrote Thomas E. Burns, Jr., then the deputy director of the Office of Foreign Missions in April 1996, and a letter attached to court filings. Burns wrote that OFM had already found someone to take over the lease from Epstein, a developer named Xenophon Galinas, and that they would not approve the sublease to Fisher. In June, Burns wrote again, this time directly to Epstein, to notify him that he had violated the lease by leaving the property and subletting it, and gave him 30 days to kick Fisher out and move in again himself. In August, Burns wrote again to tell Epstein that because Fisher was still there, the State Department was ending the lease. At the end of October, the government filed suit. Epstein was accused of carrying out an effort to put someone else in the house in his stead without clearing it with the State Department. When Richard C. Massey, an OFM official who had been the point person for Epstein's lease, was deposed in 1997 by the defense lawyers, he told them Epstein had appeared to make a concerted effort to put someone else in the property without state knowing. Mr. Epstein was shopping the property around town without our knowledge and all over town. We had called some real estate agents who asked us about it. I do not know how many people in the city of New York had a copy of Mr. Epstein's lease. Richard C. Massey, the OFM official, was not able to be reached for comment. So what was Epstein up to? Why had he abandoned the decadent mansion so abruptly and moved out without getting permission to sublet? Epstein made it publicly known that he was moving out, telling the New York Times in 1996 that the mansion on East 71st Street that would become famous in the context of his alleged crimes was now his. It belonged to Epstein's client and mentor, Les Wexner. It's unclear how much Epstein paid for the house, if anything, as it was reportedly transferred without a purchase price from a trust linked both him and Wexner to a company controlled by Epstein, which I believe was J. Epstein and Co. Fisher, who reportedly once counseled law students to look into a mirror and practice telling potential clients the retainer was $100,000, was banned from practicing in federal court in the Southern District of New York in 2013 after a court grievance committee ruled that he had stolen money from a client. Wow. So really interesting stuff there. Rosie Gray. And that was actually a couple of years ago. That was almost a month before Epstein died in 2019. So really interesting stuff there because he was arrested, I think, on the 6th of July, if I'm not mistaken. So about a week or so after that article was written. Why was the State Department leasing property to Epstein? The State Department was doing that? The U.S. State Department, not some Jewish billionaire named Les Wexner. Interesting. Very interesting. Interesting take here from Deb. If Epstein was blackmailing rich and powerful people like the Clintons, he would have been dead decades ago. Perhaps, unless he had a more powerful entity than the Clintons behind him. Who would that be? Who would that be? I want to share a tweet from Maria Farmer at Artistic Blower. Wexner owns Ohio. Hashtag arrest Wexner. Hashtag do your job. Hashtag pedo. Hashtag criminal elite. Hashtag Wexner. Hashtag pedo class. Another tweet. The Ohio New Albany Sheriff's Department hung up on the phone when I made a distress call from Les Wexner's home. I called again, assuming it was a mistake. They said, "You are never leaving. The sheriff is at the gate. We work for Wexner." Click. That was 2 days ago. Sometimes I miss your tweets. I miss people's tweets sometimes, guys. I'm following a lot of people, which I might actually change at some point. I'm not really sure. I hope I've been on Rockfin okay this whole time. Rockfin's a bit of a hassle because you have to wait about a minute and then it says go live and then you click go live. So there's a bit of a delay there, let's say. So that being said, I think I covered everything I want to cover. I just want to double check. Still waiting on a decision from Judge Lewis Kaplan. Ghislaine Maxwell, perjury charges dropped if she doesn't get a new trial. So she's got that W at the very least. That's definitely a win, albeit a small win but a win nonetheless for Ghislaine Maxwell and Team Maxwell over there. And another thing was brought up too was the money that the lawyers would be making on a double trial. It's a double payday, right? If they get a new trial. So obviously there's a huge demand there, probably on both sides, maybe not on the prosecution side because they maybe got the result they were looking for, or maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that's why this is going on, because both sides want to redo it because they want, which is something that hadn't occurred to me before, because they both didn't get the result they were looking for. But nonetheless, the government, although they get paid much less, it would still be a double payday, assuming they're using the same prosecutorial team that they did before, which I would assume they would do. But why you have, am I using the right camera? Okay, I am. Why you have Maureen Comey on that team, I don't know. Foolish. Very foolish. Okay, guys, if you want to support me, buy me a coffee or a tea. buymeacoffee.com/AddieAds. Subscribestar, Patreon, Venmo, Cash App I also have. I try not to send people to PayPal because they shave off a little bit off the top. So those other ones are great. Substack as well, addieads.substack.com. And Rockfin is where you can find my videos. I'm also on Twitter. We're not streaming on Twitter, though, because they still haven't allowed me to resume that. I've been that privilege has been revoked for me for whatever reason. So we're going to look into Scotty a little deeper and more of this stuff as well. So stay frosty. Subscribe to the podcast. Anywhere podcasts are found, this can be listened to, as well as those aforementioned places. I got Instagram as well, AddieAds, ADDYADDS, and then my PeerTube, vid.addieads.us, and my website is addieads.one, ADDYADDS.one. Thanks a lot, guys. Ciao.